So why go digital? That's the main question. And again, over the last 4 or 5 years, um, working with multiple practices, well over 100, and certainly our practice transitioning over the last 7 years, I've identified 10 reasons that you should think about. And again, you may be totally outside of this digital loop. You may be scanning, you may be delving into it, but I'm hoping today that you really started to get a glimpse of what is possible. But these are the 10 reasons in no particular order that I think can really help you increase the predictability, efficiency, and profitability of your practice. Number one is just increase predictability and efficiency with nuts and bolts restorative services. The ability for you to be able to prep crowns, whether it's a single tooth, whether it's a quadrant, for you ability to see your preps in a way that you've never seen them before, to know whether your tissue's been retracted, and to delegate the vast majority of this to your assistants. So you can prep and you can manage the tissue, and then maybe you have to scan the prep depending on what your state you're in. But for the team to be able to really get in there, scan the rest of the master model, the opposing, the bite, and no bite records, none of that stuff's going on. I mean, that data is going to get sent directly to the lab where they're going to be able to see it in a way that far supersedes anything that we could do with impressions. And remember, in the old school with impressions, they were pouring, they were trimming dies. It was not always the highest paid person making the decisions on where your margins are. You're trying to hand articulate models or use a record. This is better. And I think most of you probably have gone down at least this road. The second thing is the faster recognition of occlusal problems and increased ability to communicate with your patients. Even with just a 2-bite or a multi-bite scan, again, not all scanners will do this, but iTero, Medit certainly will, CareStream, the ability to scan in CR and MI very, very rapidly with something like a leaf gauge like I showed you, and then to be able to zoom in, take away the color, and show patients facets exactly where they are fiddling with their teeth will gain interest in a way that we never could see looking at stone models on articulators, which were often a couple weeks after we did it. Similarly, the ability to take your scans and put it in software that whether you're doing that yourself or you're having the lab do that, what took a couple of days and several hours to get models on an articulator, again, is about a 15-minute practice. As I said, we're using 3Shapes, not the scanner software, but the 3Shapes premium software, Exicad, several of our doctors are using, RealGuide from ZimV is another option, but virtual articulation is a reality. And remember, once it's on this instrument, you can change the contour path, you can look at excursions, we can see occlusal interferences so much faster and really so much better. And again, I think one of the tragedies of analog, and I did it that way for 30 years, was that most practices just didn't utilize it, which meant a lot of occlusal information didn't get looked at, didn't get considered in larger plans. Some patients that have wear facets, like the scan that I just showed you, this is looking at CR and MI. And again, once it's on the articulator, we can close that down until we get the first point of contact. And notice in the digital world how the lower scan just comes through the upper model. If we close that patient on the arc, we close up, look at this again. If we close this patient on the arc until the first contact happens in the front of the mouth, we're going to see that because of the arc, there's much more penetration in the posterior. And if you are going to try to have centric relation and maximum cuspation be the same, and you are going to equilibrate, this is how much tooth structure we would have to grind away. In the analog world, I had to do trial equilibrations on stone. We'd mount models in centric relation. It would be hitting in the back, and we would grind on the teeth until the front teeth touched. Now we can just close the articulator, let the scans pass through one another, And we can even use a slice tool to measure exactly how much is sticking through. So here again, between mounting in minutes and doing what I would consider a trial equilibration in literally minutes, this has saved me literally hours of time. I know within a matter of minutes that I'd have to grind away almost 0.7 millimeters off a molar. Now, in a 30-year-old person, I'm not going to do that. So what am I going to do in this case? Well, I'm probably going to consider ortho. Aligners do a nice job of posterior intrusion. So this is a big deal for me. And again, if you're trying to go down the road of more comprehensive care, looking at occlusion and planning for proper occlusal management means we have to use instrumentation. And there's just no way I could ever go back to the analog world, because this has saved me so much time, and it allows me to see things far more predictably, far more efficiently, and I believe more accurately. Number 3 is a far easier implementation path towards comprehensive case planning. Because we're on that virtual instrument, we can do digital design or digital waxing, where we can plan specifically where we want teeth to be. And again, we're not waxing, we're scaling teeth, as I've showed you. We choose from a library of teeth that we think the patient will like, and those type of designs will allow us to print models that then can be transferred into the patient's mouth as provisional restorations. I just have never done it any better at any point in my career than the way we can do it now. So to be able to take a patient from her pre-op situation, plan for orthodontics, working with interdisciplinarily with my orthodontist, get teeth in the right position, do a digital design where we can get provisionals in her mouth, scan the provisionals and get final restorations back. This process of optimum care is better. It's just better. Again, the choice as we look at this is whether you have the software or not. And if you don't, number 4 is we do have unprecedented communication ability with the lab, but also with our interdisciplinary team. TeamViewer is probably the primary one, because when we're using TeamViewer, if I log into Lee's computer, we both have control of the mouse. I can see exactly what he sees. It's like we're sitting right next to one another. Zoom more recently has added the ability to share the mouse, and so that might be better if you're going to have a whole interdisciplinary team on, because multiple people can be looking at the same thing. But why not use this? You know, in the analog world, we had to physically get together. If we were looking at an articulator, there was no way to hold it up to a webcam and really see it. But in this world, you know, we can do all the 2D discussions that we might want, talk about where we would want the incisal edge, where we would want the gingival contours, whether we're going to move teeth to get the gingival contours optimized, or whether the periodontist is going to be involved. And of course, when we get to the point of occlusal design, showing everybody what we're going to be able to do, whether we're working in maximum or cuspation or centric relation. So again, unprecedented communication. That's something that Lee said early on that I didn't appreciate, but the ability to communicate may be the primary reason to go digital. Number 5 is to create night guards, orthotics with precision fit and minimal adjustments in a fraction of the time. This has been huge in our practice, because we do quite a bit of TMD type treatment. We make a lot of deprogrammers. We make lower tanners, more for our TMJ patients. We do a lot of upper night guards. And in the software of both 3Shapes and Exocad and RealGuide, you have the capacity to do that. Same principles of mounting. We're still on a virtual articulator. We can still see all of the centric contacts. We can design the guidance, and specifically the angle of guidance. This can be exported as an STL. We can print them, whether the lab's printing them or you're printing them. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about this today, but right now the key splint soft material is what we're doing. Horrible name, it's not soft, but it's a little bit thermoplastic, so you can heat it and it will mold. But this is a very hard, beautiful material. But again, we can design these things in about 15 minutes. Our assistant Charity is doing all of these in our practice, and we have by far the best fitting orthotics that we've ever had. This one hasn't been touched yet. And so you can see where the lines were before and where we are. And again, we've got a little tweaking to do, but watch the retention. This is unrelined. So, back in the old days, not that long ago, we were designing all of our orthotics on analog instruments, and we were making shells that always required relining. So we have a much better fit, a much better initial product. The patient breaks it. We have the file. We can print another. It's a big deal to the efficiency and predictability and profitability of the practice. Number 6 is the ability to stack data sets. So as we take scans and CBCTs and fake scans and photos, we can stack them on top of one another. And maybe nothing is more powerful than the implant workflow, where we can take a digital design of where we want the teeth to be and layer it on top of the CBCT. So when we start to plan the implants, we can see precisely the tooth of where we want it to be. Not just a stock tooth, but one that's been designed for good centric stops and guidance. This allows us to make surgical guides, allows us to do guided surgery. This workflow actually got me to start doing surgery myself, because I started realizing the ones that were easy, the ones that had tons of bone horizontally and vertically, so it added quite a bit of to the bottom line month to month of the practice. But if it's more complicated, again, the ability to go on TeamViewer with my surgeon or periodontist and the lab and all have this discussion together where we're all on the same page is really unprecedented. Number 7, the ability to stack data sets to precisely communicate aesthetic and functional contours with the lab. What I said in the presentation, in a case like this where you're doing some orthodontics to get teeth in a better position and then doing some provisionals, the provisional becomes our primary way that we're communicating to the lab. So if we can scan the provisional and we've scanned the preps, the ability for the lab to superimpose or stack the provisional model right on top of the prep model allows them to see exactly where we want the incisal edge to be, what we want the lingual contours to be, what we want the facial contours to be, and then they can use the same basic mold that we picked for the design for the provisionals, and then they just basically overlay it. So again, back in the analog days where we would take impressions of temporaries and impressions of preps and cross-mount the models and use labial matrices and guide tables, this is just far superior to anything that we did in the past. Number 8, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about it, but a little bit, but the ability to streamline your complete denture protocols and create more predictive tooth position and fit. I've always enjoyed doing removable, was kind of a turby-filled guy, but our ability, whether the patient shows up with a situation where we need to remove teeth, or the patient doesn't have a denture, is a dentulous and doesn't have a denture, or they does have a denture, we do have specific protocols for each of those scenarios. What I'm telling you is it feels like when we're doing the design online together, that like we're doing a wax up. We still have some basic landmarks we're working from, but we have protocols to end up with a better fitting restoration or prosthesis that also has really specific tooth position from an aesthetic and functional perspective. Number 9 is a little more advanced, but as we get down the road, the ability to 3D print provisional restorations at the time of the prep appointment for us, where we are now, is definitely a game changer. So again, being able to do virtual extraction, being able to do some design. This is one of my daughter's cases where she's getting kind of the lower plane worked out, and then we'll get the upper plane worked out in provisionals. But being able to take something, take a design, work with the lab, get a file back that we can print and do a little staining and glazing on. Again, we're using resin ceramic materials. You certainly can use Luxatemps and things like this, but if we're going longer and if we can print to the margin, the only thing that's going to happen is it's just going to be better, right? Better soft tissue, stronger provisional, particularly for bridge work and implants. So this is something to work towards. The last one is it just creates a wow factor. Patients know that everything's going this way. And if you're trying to be that go-to practice in your town, having the latest technology, I think, is an important piece to it. So we want to help practices have that predictability, efficiency, and profitability in the practice. But I think having the wow factor, having something that sticks out, something that fits with your vision is a big part of it. And this is something that with the docs that we're working with that see this pretty consistently. So it seems daunting, right? There's just a lot going on here, how to get started with this. And I do think that there is a logical path, starting with getting really, really good data collection, going from left to right here. A doctor that has a scanner, dental teams start getting good at that. I think the next step is to start talking to the lab. All the labs are using these softwares. They'll be 3Shape or Exocad, usually RealGuide starting to make its way in. But starting with great data and then communicating to the lab, use something like TeamViewer to communicate at a high level, get them to start mounting some models for you, get them to start doing wax-ups, but be over their shoulder. Set up meetings where you can communicate. The next step is that the dentist will purchase design software. That's the next big step, whether you're going to go with 3Shape, whether you're going to go with Exocad, whether you're going to go with RealGuide. And you can start doing some of these protocols like mounting models, like fabricating splints, doing your designs, surgical guides, and working towards even printing provisionals or dentures in-house. And so, initially I did all the design work and I farmed out. Once I got the design done, I had the lab print it for me. So my next step was to get a printer. And printers are coming down all the time. They're getting better. They're broader spectrum. They're faster. Seems like the Asiga as well as the Sprint Ray are kind of the hot ones right now. But there's a lot of good ones. If we keep going, some doctors may get a mill, and doctors may start with a mill. They started CIRAC. They might go kind of the other way with it. But for a lot of docs, if it's where we are right now, we're considering getting a mill in the practice to start milling some of our nuts and bolts, crown and bridge restorations. Still probably always use the high-end aesthetic ones with the lab, and certainly our all-in-X's and things like that Lee will do for us. But, ultimately, we've got some doctors, Charlie Wall and Kevin Cross, who've actually hired in-house technicians and do all of this. So what I've really recognized is there's basically a couple of models. There's sort of 3 lanes that a doctor can choose, and you can think about this. But I would suggest that immediately you can start in Model 1. You're probably already getting data, but create that relationship with the lab and start doing some communication and start planning at a higher level. Model 2 involves software and the printer, and you don't have to do both at the same time. And some doctors might never get to 3, and that's fine. A lot of the doctors that work with us are at the Model 2 level. This will allow you to replace your analog articulators, do your trial equilibrations, have oversight over your designs, print orthotics, be highly involved in implant cases, and you can start printing a lot of those implants in-house. So if we look at the variations here, again, Model 1 and Variation 1 is just what I said, capturing data and using the TeamViewer to communicate with the lab. And again, this gives the doc a lot of options without having to own the software. So this is a very economical way. It becomes the dental team's job to capture great data, and it becomes the lab's job to use the software to manipulate the data. But then you're going to be over their shoulder on those TeamViewer meetings. The other possibility is exactly what we just said, but the dental office also owns a printer. And what's cool about this is, again, while the lab owns the software, and it's the job of the dentist lab to capture optimum data, while you do the team viewer meeting and are looking over their shoulders, when it comes time to printing the outputs, whether it's a wax up, a provisional surgical guide, this can be sent back to the dental office, where the dental team can start printing their outputs. So remember, it's possible to have a scanner and a printer in your practice, but somebody's got to manipulate the data. So if you don't have software, utilizing the lab and communicating at a high level is going to be huge. Model 2, Variation 2. This is where essentially the dental office purchases design software and starts mounting cases and performing digital designs. So dental team captures data, they do the design work, but the lab is still outputted to the lab to go ahead and print or mill. And so this is where I was for a long time. I spent a long time in Model 2, Variation 2, where I had control over the data capture, control over the design, but outputs happened at the lab. Now, if we get to Model 2, Variation 2, where I am now, we basically capture the data, we do the design, and we're doing a lot of our in-house printing. Now, does that mean I never use lead? No. Like in denture workflows, I use lead. I still sometimes get help with them with designs. But like all of orthotics, the vast majority of our treatment planning, digital designs, wax ups happen in-house. We do most of our surgical guides. And so this is a very exciting place to be because there's a lot of ROI here. When I think about what I spent just on orthotics and the TMJ side of my practice, and that we can make these for dollars rather than hundreds of dollars, and we're doing so many of them a year, this becomes a very, very exciting way. And then in Model 3, this is really just when the doc also implements a mill. Okay? And so, this is where you start to kind of have a full service lab in your practice, and it may make sense to have a person completely devoted to this if you ever get to this point. But you don't have to, and that's why going back to thinking about, okay, I'm going to scan, what do I want to do with it? And we'll talk about, I think, a logical way to implement in a little bit. So why did I go digital? Well, all of the above reasons, and because I was looking at this from another perspective. I think most of you know I taught with Dr. Dawson from about 2003 till he died in 2019. And I got just an unbelievable opportunity to spend some really quality time with him in his last years, maybe when he was at his wisest. And so right before he died, 2 weeks before he died, he was at our lake house in Smith Mountain Lake, on the western side of Virginia. And we'd been talking about this a lot, but we really had a conversation there on our deck about where dentistry was going, and his genuine concern that digital dentistry allows us to do things so efficiently that we can make mistakes. And he was very concerned that these principles of occlusion that we talked about today are going to be missed, right? They're just going to be forgotten. That in fact, doing things efficiently with digitally without the principles of aesthetics, without the principles of function, without the principles of biology, maybe will lead us to worse results. And so he really challenged me to be the person that made sure these principles that I've spent my time, my lifetime's work really focusing on, that we bring them into the digital world. And I'm really starting to think maybe that right now is why I wouldn't been down all this path, and Dawson and occlusion and all these things, for making sure that the next generation of dentists have not only the concepts, but also the tools to use digital workflows, digital technologies at a very high level. So closely related to that was my daughter. She came out of dental school in 2020 in the height of COVID, and has been through the Pankey Institute now and is on her path. but I see her drawn to these digital workflows. She loves the digital workflows, but working with her to implement and tie them together is a big part of why I'm doing this. And it is also why Lee is doing this. I mean, he has spent his lifetime developing techniques and trying to do laboratory technology at the highest level. And he loves the digital, but he's tying principles that have been around a long time, tried and true principles of biology and fit and all that with these digital protocols. So Cranham Culp Digital Dental really is founded from the standpoint that we want to empower dental teams to enhance clinical outcomes and predict profitability by transitioning to effective digital technologies and workflows, all while upholding the core principles of aesthetics, occlusion, biology, and structural integrity. It's that balance. As we think about this transition in, I do think the greatest challenge is maintaining a balance between an effective use of these timeless principles of aesthetics, occlusion, and biology with the effective execution of sound digital workflows. And this does take some time, planning, and discipline. I can tell you when I went through it, what was frustrating is there was no place to learn this because all of the digital workflows were related to dental laboratories, and we use them different. We use different things to visualize where we're going. So it requires some very, very specific training that is going to immerse yourself and remind you of the goals and the principles and what we're trying to do with how to maximize the efficiency with scanning, CBCT, the software, and the output devices, which is why we have created this course. Now, this has been something that's been around about 4 or 5 years. This latest iteration is a 1-year online mentorship. If you want to continue after that, you certainly can, but you can find out about this on ccdigitaldental.com. I'm excited because while for docs that want to just do this, they can go to the site, they can sign up. We'll talk about exactly what's in it in a second, but it's also available through the Pankey Institute and Seattle Study Club. We're partnering with them. So if you have a relationship with either, you will hear about this from the people at Seattle Study Club. Inside of at the Pankey Institute, you'll actually sign up through CC Digital Dental. So basically, what's the course? All right, so it's a year long. We're going to have 90-minute online group coaching sessions that will kind of go back and forth between looking at a principle of aesthetics, occlusion, or biology, and then showing you something digitally. We have a robust 30-hour online library, which we'll talk about. We've got 6 3-hour guest keynote presenters throughout the year that focus, again, more on principles. We have a private WhatsApp group to get answers taken care of on the fly. And then we even have some one-on-one coaching options for you if you want a little bit more focus on either a specific workflow, help with a case, or maybe even training your team. When we look at the 75-minute group coaching sessions, and again, 75 to 90 minute, here they are. We'll talk about helping you choose your lane, optimizing your digital data, aesthetic planning, occlusal design, virtual articulation, printing provisionals, all the way down to all on X and interdisciplinary and ortho restorative. I think what you just need to know from this is in the 75 to 90 minutes, we're going to be hitting the highlights of something specific and then directing you towards our online videos, the training that we'll show you here in a second. We also have the online lecture series. These are 11 to 2 Eastern Standard Time on Friday, and trying to have the best online lecture series we can. What we are seeing today is actually the first one that we opened up to the public, but we're going to be talking about adhesive dentistry with 2 dentists and material scientists from UAB. Marshall Hansen's going to be talking about direct resin veneers. He might be the best in the world at it. Marv Berlin's going to be looking at prepless porcelain veneers. great friend of mine in Dallas who has a massive practice there. Michael Gunson practiced with Bill Arnett in Santa Barbara, California. They have a practice completely devoted to orthodontic surgery. So we're looking at facial aesthetics and ortho and helping us recognize the cases that really could benefit with that from an airway standpoint, from an occlusion standpoint, from an aesthetics standpoint. And then we'll wind up with one of the most popular speakers in the Seattle Study Club Network, Press Shaw from Canada, talking about interdisciplinary treatment planning. And again, I come from more the 3Shape side. Press is an Exocad guy, so he'll be blending planning digitally, but also working with that interdisciplinary team. Probably at the core of this course, most importantly, is the online video library, which is organized by workflow. If you look at it, you can see the first section does have sort of 10 to 20 minute videos that allow you to, if you need help remembering a foundational principle, you can go in there and see that. It's right there, organized there for you. So aesthetics, occlusion, our treatment planning protocols, how to work with equilibration, all that. When you get down to section 3, we have a whole section on, this is where, based on the workflow that you're interested in, let's say you want to do a basic mounting, for every thing that you see here, there's a video for the doctor that wants to mount but doesn't have software. So this is going to be doctors how to work with the lab. If you want the buttonology of 3Shapes, if you evolve and buy the 3Shapes lab software, there it is. If you end up buying Exocad, there it is. And we'll be adding Real Guide soon. But if you look at this, this is about a 30-hour video. This is all the stuff that happens in planning in section 3. But then we've got a whole section on orthotics, a whole section on printing provisionals, a whole section on digital dentures, a whole section on implant planning, and a whole section of milling. And again, I don't expect anybody to do all these videos, but it is a library, and there isn't anything like this anywhere. So if you want to understand and know what to do, you don't have to spend hours on YouTube. You can go right there, scroll down, find the video, and you're ready to roll. The private WhatsApp group, again, we've got a couple hundred strong now. This I underestimated. This was Dr. Noemi Cruz-Orcutt's idea. And this is constantly, people are posting, asking questions. And again, if you're with us and you're stuck, this is probably the first place to throw it out there. And they will know where to point you, whether it's to a specific video or they might suggest a coaching session. But most of the time, it's either answered here or you can be directed to a video. In terms of one-on-one coaching, we've got 4 coaches. I'm involved with this as well. But each coach has a strength. Charlie, I mentioned earlier, he definitely has the full-service 3Shape lab, can do just about anything. Noemi is going to be great with aesthetics and case planning. Charity is my assistant and can help your assistants if they want to get help with printing or basic design inside of 3Shapes. And then Jason is our Exocad specialist. So if this makes sense to you, I don't know why it wouldn't, here's how to sign up. So if you're outside of Pankey or Seattle Study Club, just go to our website and you can scroll down and it will direct you to our Teachable site where you'll basically put in a name and a login, and it gives you some options. And just remember, if you're there, you're going to see the Digital Mastery, a one-year online mentorship, twice, once like this and once with Pankey. If you're from the Pankey Institute, the reason to do the Pankey one is there's going to be some specific lectures and workflows in there that are specific to the Pankey philosophy. So there's slight differences here. And then if you're Seattle Study Club, you're going to go through the portal at Seattle Study Club to get signed up. So what I'll leave you with is 2 quotes. And one is from Ralph Emerson, all the way back in the 1800s. And Ralph said, "As to methods, there may be a million and then some. but principles are few. The man or woman who grasps principles can successfully select their own methods. The man or woman who tries methods while ignoring principles is sure to have trouble. Powerful words, I think, written for where we are right now, because again, digital dentistry allows us to basically do things, right? It allows us to understand that this is just a method of doing something. It allows us to go from point A to point Z faster. But if we don't attach principles or specific treatment goals, we could end up in a very bad place even faster. Dr. Dawson in 2005 said those same words, not quite so eloquently, but with a lot of fire to them. And what he said was, digital dentistry in the absence of sound, occlusal, aesthetic, and restorative principles will only allow a dentist to screw up a mouth even faster. That quote back in 2005 started getting me thinking about this. It really started me to have interest in digital and start looking at it from a very, 20,000 point view at that point. But it's directed most of my efforts since that time over the last 20 years. I'm happy to report that we are now at a place where it's a reality. We have the ability to gather data at an unbelievably high level. We have unbelievable ability to manipulate that data, and we have an incredible ability to output the data through printers and mills and things like that. So what I hope you consider is training with us. We're creating a community of docs and dental teams that love dentistry, that are interested in technology, that are trying to build profitable businesses, and that's what we're going to help people do. So with that, I appreciate you hanging us with today. We hope we see you in the future. Just remember that this is my email down here, jcranham@mac.com. The website is www.ccdigitaldental.com if you have interest right here, and we hope to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great year.